morning, but this is going to be a short video. It's 20 minutes long. Um, it's from the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee on assessing the terrorist threat in Southeast Asia and the Middle East regarding the current threat matrix. And I think it's a very important to note that there's going to be an absence of certain groups within this subcommittee, this introductory um, heading for the subcommittee, and I'm going to fill in the blanks as best as I can. So, there's a reason why the reason why I wanted to basically make this video is because of the simple fact that these subcommittees, as honest as they could basically be, or in certain respects, their hidden dishonesty, is because of a lack of information or an investigation into other areas of the world that they're not allowed to investigate and duly inform the public. And this is the reason why I believe in honest media. But nevertheless, here we go.
Subcommittee on South and Central Asia will come to order. The purpose of this hearing is to discuss the current terror threat landscape in South and Central Asia and examine potential opportunities for U.S. action and regional cooperation to address the terrorist threat. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Today, we will discuss the current terror threats and the landscape throughout South and Central Asia and potential opportunities for the Trump administration to enhance our regional counterterrorism strategy. Since the Biden administration's ill-conceived and executed withdrawal from Afghanistan, the subsequent Taliban takeover, the terror threat landscape in South and Central Asia has changed dramatically. Despite the Taliban's...
By the way, just to add, this is Bill Huizenga, representative out of Michigan, who spoke out recently against the Taliban. And the Taliban's Zabihullah Mujahid said that Huizenga's remarks about al-Qaeda being in Afghanistan are unfounded. But al-Qaeda does exist in Afghanistan.
Doha Agreement's commitments, Afghanistan has once again become a hotbed for terrorists looking for safe harbor as they grow their ranks and abilities to project attacks across the region and, frankly, the world. Threats from groups such as ISIS-K and the TTP, also known as the Pakistan Taliban, are higher than any time in recorded history.
Notice there is a glaring missing group here, and that is al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the biggest al-Qaeda sect in the world currently, I believe. And, of course, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, also known as Ansar al-Qaeda in Syria. Jabhat al-Nusra, that's what they used to be called. And who leads that? Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, the president of Syria, who the United States has taken off the terrorist watch list, and who I believe will be fully endorsed in the attack on the United States. When you have a country with millions of dollars in weapons, like Afghanistan and Syria does, they have the means and the availability to conduct terrorist operations. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah are decimated, and it's not like they're going to have an international threat. What groups would have the capabilities to commit a large-scale terrorist attack that I believe will happen? Well, Tahrir al-Sham, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, along with the Taliban. And that's only because the Taliban and al-Qaeda are working together in Kabul, where you have numerous training camps. I don't know how many. And that's just being fair because, there's numerous intelligence reports that say one person is not telling the truth, the other person is not telling the truth. And if you don't source your information, you're going to have a hard time believing people. And unfortunately, this is what happened to me recently with somebody. I'm not going to name names, but it's not like their information isn't um, reputable, right? Their information, some of it is valid, it's tangible, right? So, and you only need to take in the reports of their of people within the country itself to show you that Al Qaeda certainly does exist in Afghanistan. And for example, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, who was fucking killed on the same block where the Taliban were living in Kabul, in Kabul, the fucking capital of Afghanistan. I think Al Qaeda will learn from their mistakes, and that is that they won't, do any media interviews. And they won't tell you where their training camps are, and they'll be in the remote areas. And the only time we're ever going to know about intelligence in these remote areas is by drone satellite. That's it. So, Bill Huzbinga, more credit to him for heading the committee here and speaking out on the Taliban, which is a terrorist organization.
And internally, Pakistan has seen the highest rates of terror attacks in many years. And of course, the recent attack in Palagram reminded us all that the militant threat in Kashmir has not subsided. For decades, the United States has remained the global leader in the fight against terrorism. And we've
it's funny because India is a full backer of Israel. Pakistan is not a full backer of anybody. And if you haven't learned your fucking lesson after 9/11, you find out that Omar Saeed Sheikh was a militant who had training with the British MI6, was a terrorist and himself an intelligence asset as well. Not only that, he allegedly gave $100,000 to a courier to Muhammad Atta, the ringleader of the 9/11 planes operation. Okay, if that's true, then the Pakistan ISI, who the CIA once claimed is more nefarious than it itself is the Islamic CIA, can't be trusted, even after 20 years. Because they create terrorist groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed. They helped to create this group to subvert the areas of Lahore and Kashmir to fight against the Indian nationalists there. And the countries that we're allied with are basically terrorists in every definition. I mean, if you look up the definitions of terrorism, it relates to Saudi Arabia, Israel, Pakistan. I mean, even the United States, the governments, I'm meaning. So
engaged our international partners through bilateral agreements and multilateral mechanisms that have supplied our allies with training and equipment to ensure that they are able to stop the spread of terrorism from further poisoning our world. However, the threat has persisted since the 2021 ISIS-K bombing at Abbey Gate, which killed 13 American servicemen and 170 Afghan civilians and wounded many others, including one of my constituents from Southwest Michigan. The Taliban claims to be doing their best to eliminate the ISIS-K threat. However, while the Taliban claim victory, ISIS-K continues to wreak havoc, conducting attacks that target everyone from innocent civilians to Taliban officials, all while continuing its effort to radicalize and recruit from diaspora communities across and even outside of Central Asia. Last year, we saw the growing ISIS-K threat manifest as hundreds were killed in attacks in both Moscow and Tehran, and through the foiled plot to attack the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris. Nevertheless, the United States continues to display strong leadership, working closely with our partners such as the Pakistanis, who recently arrested a key planner in the Abbey Gate attacks. That individual has since been brought to the United States to stand trial for his crimes. The Pakistanis themselves are no strangers to the terrorist threat that festers within their own borders. 2024 was one of the most violent years in over a decade for Pakistan. So, groups such as Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan and the Baluchistan Liberation Army threaten civilians and Pakistani security forces alike. Rising violence from such militant groups and others pose a significant threat to Pakistan's internal security and has been the source of much friction between Pakistan and its neighbors in the region. Most recently, we saw the devastating attack on the Indian-controlled Jammu and Kashmir where 26 individuals, primarily tourists, were brutally and deliberately killed in cold blood by militants. The attack led to a military conflict between two major nuclear powers, the first of its kind in years. I want to be clear. I respect India's sovereign right to defend itself against rogue actors seeking to sow instability in the volatile region. But I support and encourage both sides to work earnestly to resolve the areas of conflict. As we discuss the challenges emanating from the region, it's essential to assess the tools that we have at our disposal to continue the fight against terrorism. The Trump administration has a unique opportunity to find new ways to engage our regional partners and find a new path to stability and security.
Let me tell you something. Trump administration has no fucking care whatsoever about stability in the Middle East as long as it doesn't involve his interests abroad. And who are his interests? Numerous. There's a lot of state officials who have their fingers in many pies. Ukraine, for example. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia basically is heading up the richest tournament on earth in golf, the LIV, at the behest of the 9/11 victims' families. Some of those idiots are playing over there for, an ungodly amount of money because money talks. And fuck you, victims' families. The government still continues to interfere in the civil matter in the Southern District of New York. And also you have Yemen, the largest humanitarian crisis that's currently ignored, along with the Sudan and what's going on with the groups like Boko Haram and Sahab, or Al Qaeda affiliates there. And that's basically ignored because you know why Africa doesn't make much news, because of the simple fact of a simple disparity in skin tone. Africa will never be in the front page of the Daily News or the Los Angeles Times. Thirdly, you have a multitude of interests in Southeast Asia, and this is why the subcommittee was created. It's back in the fold, especially with Taiwan and China at the epicenter, North Korea silently existing in the background, Japan trying to normalize relations, and then you have the interests of Indonesia, the Philippines, all right? Afghanistan, obviously, Afghanistan, who I think is going to be at the epicenter of another war in a few short years. I'd say within the minimum of 2 to 3. That depends on the next terrorist attack in the United States. Will it be recent? Will it be later? It's like predicting the 9/11 attacks. Just can't. While people are worried about terrorism and when they attack, instead of concentrating on what the committees are saying today. And this is what happened with 9/11. Before 9/11, we didn't have the advent of the internet. Okay. What was the current threat matrix to the United States? Airline industry, chemical weapons. Okay. The threat of groups like Bin Laden and Al Qaeda, who were on radio, who were, being interviewed by CNN and ABC News, like John Miller and Peter Bergen, basically telling them that, hey, we're attacking you because of your foreign policy. Now, they're not telling you what's inside their heads. It's what makes them far more dangerous now. So all you have to do is just look at our actions abroad. And if you don't think that what we're conducting in Israel by providing the Israeli fanatics with weapons, far more fanatics than they were 25 years ago. If you don't think what's happening in Yemen, the largest humanitarian crisis on earth, if you don't think what's going on in Afghanistan or Syria has repercussions, folks. We allowed for terrorists to lead these countries. Bin Laden tried in Afghanistan, tried in the Sudan, got kicked out. At least our governments were proactive a little bit back then. Clinton, as much as reprehensible as he was, tried to take the proactive approach. But nobody wanted to pull the trigger. After 9/11, the gloves were off, as Cofer Black once said, right? So now we have governments actually supporting fucking terrorists. And it's not a laughing matter anymore. This is what we did in Syria. We left the Taliban. We fought a war that meant nothing in Afghanistan. 20 years of nothing. Fighting for the biggest nothing imaginable, as that line in Apocalypse Now where the Frenchman is talking to Martin Sheen. He goes, "Well, at least we fight for a home. You're fighting for the biggest nothing, right?" That's Afghanistan. The biggest nothing. What was that about? The Taliban took over the country in weeks. It's not like the intelligence didn't come back. It's what the New York Times were reporting on with the lieutenant generals and the four-star generals that later on went on the New York Times and CNN and complained about a lack of full engagement. You got the Department of Defense saying one thing and the Department of State doing another. And then you got the intelligence services meddling in between. Are they being truthful? Are they telling you all the whole truth? You never know, because it's all about private military and industrial complexes benefits. And when there's money involved, that means Congress is involved and foreign entities, maybe.
So I want to say thank you to our witnesses, Ms. Curtis, Ms. Todd, for being here today. And I look forward to a robust conversation. And with that, I yield back and I recognize Ranking Member Kamlager-Dove for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses today. I know one of whom just got in last night from the other side of the globe. I am glad that this subcommittee is having our first regional hearing on such a critical bipartisan issue. And just off script, counterterrorism is not a Republican or a Democratic issue, and nor should it be. And it shouldn't be subjected to the partisanship that we are seeing in these halls. And I know that there's so many hearings that are put on for the culture wars and the clickbaits, and this is not one of them. And I applaud the chair for working to get this back on the schedule. Though I believe there are many reasons why we should be invested in the future of South and Central Asia, being an effective and credible partner on counterterrorism is particularly important. Just 2 months ago, we witnessed a terrible attack targeting civilians in Pahalgam, which set off a crisis between two nuclear powers. The threat remains serious. The world's largest concentration of U.S.-designated foreign terrorist organizations is in Central and South Asia. I want to focus in on particularly ISIS-K, the terrorist group that increasingly poses the greatest direct threat to the United States. ISIS-K is the most
that's saying something, because here we have another ranking congressman, right? All right, telling you that ISIS-Khorasan is going to be a threat to the United States, ignoring the fact that you have bigger terrorist organizations, like I said, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, the Taliban, and of course, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, with its president of Syria and the former emir of Al-Qaeda in Syria, Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani. I'm not calling him by his nom de guerre, that's his real name. The United States supported him to overthrow Assad. The progressives cheered. Now they're silent because now is a head chopper in office. Well, he's better than Assad. Afghanistan. I'm not going to repeat myself. I mean, look, folks, ISIS-Khorasan, is it a threat? Sure. But they're fighting the Taliban and Al-Qaeda at the same time. So they're going to be preoccupied. They're not a threat to the United States as, they're going to commit a big wave of terrorist attacks. Who has the means to do it? What are the benefits? Okay. Not only that, just like with 9/11, will the intelligence services fail us again? Just like they did before 9/11. My entire channel basically talks about this. It's about the action in the reaction, right? Did the CIA and the NSA have enough information at their disposal to stop the 9/11 attacks? According to certain officials from their respective organizations, yes. What about foreign intelligence? Israel and Saudi Arabia that were inside the United States committing the largest act of espionage and eavesdropping by a foreign agency ever that we know of in the years 2000 and 2001. Nobody talks about this anymore. And it's the reason why the whole playlist of the Gerald Shea Memorandum is required viewing. It's the most important one because I happen to think that Saudi Arabia and Israel knew about the specifics of 9/11, didn't tell the United States because it would be beneficial if the 9/11 attacks were carried out. That's not prejudice to say so. It's a fucking fact, almost. I can't prove that they knew specifics. That's the only thing missing. But how do we know if they're out of the country? Look, here we have it, right here again, on the heels of the disaster in Gaza, worse than anything in the first Gulf War. And then you have, terrorists running countries. I mean, this is the reason why I think the next terrorist attack is going to be disproportionately huge because look what they did with 9/11. I mean, think of this. If the Bajinka plot would have been successful, it would have dwarfed what 9/11 would have. 10 planes, right? 10 planes with bombs, and then 10 planes hijacked and crashed everywhere. Al Qaeda never attacks twice in the same fashion. So what's next? All right. Now we have terrorist groups leading countries, more at their disposal, more operatives, meaning with a porous border. Thank you, Trump and Biden. All right. It's all a setup to failure. Will the intelligence services, who are monitoring everywhere in the United States anyway after 9/11, remember, they're the ones with the blank checkbook. They're working with local, state, and federal governments. Are they going to fail us again because of a lack of information? And then what happens? The next terrorist attack happens? And then we just give the intelligence services and the federal government more powers to abuse our civil liberties, infringing on the Constitution? Because we got to keep America safe. I'm going to make a video on this, I think either probably tomorrow, about, in my head, what I think will be the after effects of a terrorist attack. What I think it would mean, but I don't want to lose you here.
Branch of ISIS and is internationalizing its recruitment to carry out attacks beyond the region. Successful high-profile operations in Russia and Iran in 2024 demonstrated the group's growing ability to direct and inspire atrocities around the world. ISIS-K has increasingly targeted Europe, with plots foiled in Germany, Austria, Turkey, and France.
By the way, just to remind you, the Trump administration killed the one guy who was fighting against ISIS-K in Syria and the Islamic State of Levant. And that was Qasem Soleimani, who, you deemed a terrorist. So he bombed American units. Those American units were actually engaging in protecting those terrorist groups indirectly because they were helping us to overthrow Assad. And now you got to own up to it. You people who still vote, I just shake my head at this point. You're just embarrassing.
All take seriously the U.S. intelligence community's warnings that the group's ultimate goal.
It's not hard to figure out what's going on here, folks. Not anymore.
Although ISIS-K's operations in Afghanistan and Pakistan remain a serious concern, an important enabler of the group's expanding global reach is its ability to recruit and radicalize individuals from Central Asian states. Political repression, lack of economic opportunity, community fragmentation from mass labor migration, and governance failures and corruption all create grievances among Central Asian nationals that ISIS-K is quick to weaponize. Added to that, a lack of education and poor media literacy increases people's vulnerability to online propaganda that ISIS-K is aggressively disseminating. Like many of the foreign policy challenges we face, addressing and preventing the threat of ISIS-K from ever reaching our shores requires the U.S. to be engaged and proactive, not isolationist and retreating. And dealing with a challenge as complex and persistent as terrorism requires a multifaceted and well-resourced foreign policy toolbox, including security cooperation, public diplomacy, economic support, development, and intelligence. Unfortunately, I'm concerned that this administration has eliminated many of the tools we have used to address the terrorist threat in the region, removing lines of defense we have had in place for decades. In fact, it's hard to imagine what resources will be left if U.S. foreign assistance is cut by 84%. How much of the remaining funds will even be devoted to South and Central Asia if it's all merged into an America First Opportunity Slush Fund, or whatever that is, or what personnel will be available to support counterterrorism efforts if we're firing entire chunks of the department, including RIFs supposedly going out tomorrow to the counterterrorism unit. But even if we ignore all of that, the administration has already taken actions that I'm worried have sabotaged our ability to combat terrorism in the region. Illegally dismantling the U.S. Institute of Peace, which was supporting the repatriation and reintegration of ISIS fighters to their home countries and breaking the cycle of extremism, and canceling U.S. assistance to civilians in Afghanistan, contributing to a worsening humanitarian crisis. Terminating USAID's countering violent extremism and economic development programs that were critical to addressing the drivers of radicalization in Central Asia, and then shutting down RFE-RL, including its local Tajik network, Radio Ozodi. If this committee is serious about countering terrorism, and we should be, and I believe this chair is, it is essential that we not only maintain hard capabilities, but deploy the tools that help our partners address the root causes of terrorism. And
If it was so serious, it would be filled. This is an empty hall, by the way. You'll see it in certain clips. If they were serious, it's a fucking joke.
radicalization. It is time for us to stand up and talk about these issues. I look forward to working with my colleagues on this important bipartisan issue, and with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. We are pleased.
Hey, there you go. Really serious. It's really serious.
To have our distinguished witnesses with us here today. First, we have
Dead
Lisa
serious. Look at
Curtis,
him.
Senior Fellow and Director of the Indo-Pacific Security Program at the Center for a New American Security, and a former NSC Senior Director for South and Central Asia in the first Trump administration. We also welcome Brianna Todd, Professor of the Practice of Central Asian Studies at the National Defense University. So thank you both for being here today. Your full statements will be made part of our record, and I request that each of you keep your oral remarks to 5 minutes so that we might have time for questions from our members. And with that, I now recognize Ms. Curtis for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
I mean, look at that. What does that tell you? Look at this. We're talking about threats to the United States in terms of terrorist groups. That's what this subcommittee is. This is the Armed Foreign Affairs Committee. Ted Huizenga is chairing it. I mean, you got a fucking response from the Taliban regarding this and Huizenga's comments. This is just, it's so serious.
First, we have Lisa time for questions from our, members.
God.
And with
We're
that,
in trouble.
I now recognize Ms. Curtis for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
We're in trouble.
And please turn your mic on. Make sure that that red light is on.
Thank you. Chairman Huizenga, Ranking Member Kamlager-Dove, and other distinguished members of the subcommittee. It is an honor to testify before you today, and I will briefly summarize my written remarks. The terrorism landscape in South and Central Asia is complex, and it requires the focused attention of the United States to monitor and contain threats that impact the security of the U.S. homeland, as well as broader U.S. national security interests. The presence of ISIS-K in Afghanistan has become an increasingly global concern, especially since it claimed 2 major attacks last year in Russia and Iran. ISIS-K operatives plotting attacks in the West have also been arrested in Europe and the United States, and U.S. officials have raised concerns about ISIS-K's capabilities and intent to target the United States. While U.S. and Taliban interests converge on the need to counter ISIS-K, the two sides differ considerably on how to contain the overall terrorist threat in the region, as well as on human rights and women's issues. The Taliban can never be viewed as a counterterrorism partner. This is for several reasons. First, the Taliban remains allied with al-Qaeda, with whom it fought side by side for 30 years.
There you go.
Second, the Taliban have opened tens of thousands of religious schools which are inculcating a new generation of young Afghans with their extremist ideologies. Third, the Taliban has increasingly cracked down on the rights of women and girls. Afghanistan is the only nation in the world that forbids girls from going to school. Now let me turn to India and Pakistan. The recent
and
India-Pakistan
they'll tell you that Iran is the greatest exporter of terrorism. This is not from her, but from the State Department currently. And who's feeding them that information? Obviously, two lobbies, Israel and Saudi Arabia, the Gulf. Why? For ideological and political reasons. The ideological belongs to the Gulf. The political reason belongs to Israel. Iran's no threat to the United States. They're a threat to Israel because Israel continually threatens them. I mean, come on, folks. The next terrorist attack will probably be blamed on Iran to engage in a war against them and finally finish them off. They'll tell you that, oh, Hezbollah attacked the United States, not ISIS-K, or a combination of both. They're working together. We need to get rid of them, right? They don't believe it because that's not going to be true. Most likely, the groups that will attack the United States are Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and of course, Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, along with the Taliban.
Conflict was precipitated by the April 22nd terrorist attack in Indian Kashmir, which New Delhi has blamed on the U.S.-designated Pakistan-based terrorist group, Lashkar-e-Taiba. India retaliated on May 7th by striking the LET Lashkar-e-Taiba headquarters in Muridke in the Punjab province of Pakistan, as well as at several other sites in Pakistan. What transpired afterward was arguably the most serious conflict between India and Pakistan since their 1971 war.
An interest for the United States.
Following 4 days of Indian and Pakistani missile and drone strikes on each other's military installations, U.S. officials intervened to broker a ceasefire.
We're talking about trade goods here, okay? Exporting, importing, right? And India's a huge market to outsource. Big corporations too. Walmart, Target, Optimum, Viacom.
On May 10th. Pakistan has long hosted terrorist groups that attack India. It's even backed groups like the Haqqani Network that conducted some of the most brutal attacks on U.S. forces in Afghanistan.
By the way, the leader of the Taliban, Sirajuddin Haqqani, son of Jalaluddin Haqqani of the Haqqani Network. The Haqqani Network were the first Afghan group to accept, as they were called, Arab Afghans or foreign Arabs into their ranks against the Soviets. Later, it was Gulbuddin Hekmatyar and Abdul Rasul Sayyaf, and they saw some benefit in having martyrdom operatives on their side. People that, were running toward the bullet instead of away from it. Afghans were better fighters, more suitable to be in the mountains working on large guns. But the Arabs were not very good in terms of hand-to-hand combat, but they were willing to die. Something the Afghans were a little bit hesitant in doing.
Recently, however, we have seen tensions between Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban over their harboring of Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, or the TTP, which now conducts regular attacks inside Pakistan. So how should the U.S. deal with this volatile mix of terrorist threats and conflict? First, Washington should implement tailored counterterrorism cooperation with each nation of the region, especially Tajikistan, given the increasing number of Tajikistan citizens susceptible to ISIS-K recruitment. Second, Washington must continue to invest in the strategic partnership with India and improve counterterrorism cooperation with New Delhi, while avoiding trying to mediate a solution to the vexed Kashmir dispute. Third, the U.S. should increase counterterrorism cooperation with Pakistan on mutual threats like ISIS-K, but press Islamabad
This
to
is all
crack
stuff,
down
you
on
heard in the years
U.S.-designated
prior to
terrorist
9/11.
organizations
Just
like the
about.
Lashkar-e-Taiba that attack India. Pakistan's dual policies on terrorism requires a delicate policy approach from the United States.
God fucking sakes, you want to defeat terrorism? It's simple. Stop being a terrorist. What does that mean? The United States should stop meddling in the affairs of the Middle East. That's the end of the story. Our government is proactive. They think long term. That's what foreign policy analysts do. All right. Intelligence managers, they go to principals meetings, they work out on what's the current threat matrix, what can we do to subvert terrorism, and all they end up doing is just pausing it. They don't eliminate it. And that's because if you eliminate the cancer, you have no need for the doctor. All right. These people would be out of job. It's not like they're in cahoots with these groups. They don't need to be, but it's allowing them to exist and just poking the bear every once in a while in regards to say an issue like Gaza. Gaza is really the main issue that a lot of these terrorist groups use. U.S. foreign policy. It's never about religion, but yet, currently what I'm seeing on viral media is that Islam is not compatible with the West. It always has been. It's just that you don't like them because they're brown and because they make the headlines because you think they're terrorists, right? These groups exist because you malign and destroy these countries to the point where there's nothing to look forward to in the future. And you ally with the very entities that are the enemy to these people. And this goes back decades and decades to have an understanding. All right. And, like I said in another video once, bin Laden and Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi didn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a terrorist. They were made this way. How? Through the actions of an aggressor. Is it our fault? The United States, it always fault? No, it's not always our fault, but we're a big problem. Get rid of poverty. Throw millions of, not just in counterterrorism measures, but throw millions into foreign dollars regarding schools, regarding infrastructure, to give people a hope and a work, something to look forward to in the future. You take that away, there's basically very few options left on the table. And that's where these ghoulish imams from these madrasas come from. Oh, we hate these Western backed countries, and the government's basically stealing from us and taking every opportunity available. We'll give it to you, and plus with a promise of paradise. And an impressionable young kid who's freaking 12 or 13, whose family comes from poverty, and poverty breeds multiplication in human beings. Less money, more people, and then you got desperation. There's a lot going on. Now, these measures that she's talking about basically just, the bare minimum. And there's a lot to discuss here, but it's going to take trillions of dollars to do this, and not just from the United States, but from governments that aren't corrupt. Good luck. What are we going to do? Go to war against Southeast Asia and the Middle East in the hopes of creating, another crusade type of scenario? Well, that's exactly what a lot of these evangelical Christians and these Kahanists want, and a lot of these Islamic emirs like Jelani wants.
That makes careful distinctions between helpful and harmful Pakistani actions regarding terrorism. Fourth, while it may be necessary to engage with the Taliban on ISIS-K, the U.S. must condition any movement toward recognizing or legitimizing the Taliban on their improving the rights of women and girls.
Should never legitimize the
Additionally,
Taliban.
the United States must continue assistance for online education as well as scholarships for Afghan women and girls to study abroad. These are inexpensive programs that help blunt extremist ideologies that fuel terrorism. And that completes my opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Gentlelady yields back. With that, Ms. Todd, you are recognized for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Chairman Huizenga, Ranking Member Kamlager-Dove, and other distinguished members of the subcommittee. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. As the ranking member noted, I just returned last night from a counterterrorism seminar in Uzbekistan, so I'm delighted to be here with you today, and I would underscore that all of the opinions and views expressed are my own. You've received my written testimony, so today I will focus on 3 main points about the evolving terror threat in Central Asia and why U.S. leadership remains crucial. First, the terror threat in Central Asia is reaching an inflection point. Central Asia has not historically been a center of terrorist activity, but we are now witnessing some troubling trends. The Islamic State Khorasan province, also known as ISIS-K, is expanding its influence and exploiting regional vulnerabilities. Central Asians were involved in several high-profile attacks last year, including the deadly Crocus City Hall attack in Moscow. To attract recruits, ISIS-K and its related affiliates have become more agile, more globalized, and more ideologically seductive to the marginalized. Today, they are radicalizing, recruiting, and
Yeah, this is true, by the way. Okay, recruitment is very easy now as compared to Bin Laden and the Sahab media arm of Al Qaeda, right? That's named Al Qaeda's media is called Assad, and what they would use propaganda videos like the first Gulf War, the United States stationed in Mecca and Medina. Now all you need to do is show videos coming out of Gaza. That's it. Then you got people. Oh, we need to attack. The United States is behind that too. I mean, much less what's happening in Yemen, much less of what's happening in Sudan, much less what's happening in Syria, okay, Libya, right, for examples. And there's plenty here to recruit many people in what I believe will be a big terrorist attack. It's not to put fear in people. I mean, just take a look at what's going on. A lot more has happened in the last 5 years than they did in the previous 20. It's the stuff coming out of Gaza is just, and now West Bank. It's like this is coming back to us, and we have to be more prepared now than ever, even before 9/11. I mean, this is just bad.
and directing attacks with unprecedented speed and precision. ISIS-K has leveraged encrypted messaging apps, cryptocurrency platforms, and AI-generated content to coordinate attacks and disseminate propaganda, as seen in its recruitment efforts following the Crocus City Hall attack. Second, U.S. engagement in Central Asia is essential for our national security. I've asked them to project a map, and if you can see the map, the region sits at a strategic crossroads, bordered by Russia, China, Afghanistan, and Iran. For over 30 years, the United States has supported the sovereignty, stability, and security of these countries.
And also, too, let's get this out of the way as well. If you're looking for added intelligence to help to prevent a terrorist attack, well, you just ruined that with Russia, Iran, and China. Okay, huge countries that have a very expansive intelligence services that could actually help you in terms of sharing information. Now they'll probably be very hesitant in sharing information because you made them into a fucking adversary with your disastrous foreign policy. Thanks a lot, by the way.
Stable partners in Central
And
Asia.
that wasn't the case before 9/11. We had intelligence about a threat by Bin Laden and Al Qaeda. in the years 2001. That's why they call it the summer of the hot summer of 2001, where you had Russian, Egyptian, Iranian, even from Saudi Arabia, vague intelligence, but at least intelligence. Now, we ain't got shit. And you saw that with the empty hall. Why are they going to go to a committee that they're not even vestedly interested in, or we don't have much intelligence to impart our thoughts on it? I mean, nobody's talking about Huizenga here, for the exception of the Taliban minister.
Work with us to share intelligence, disrupt terror financing, intercept returning foreign terrorist fighters, and support the rehabilitation and reintegration of returning fighters' family members. They are key to preventing attacks against the United States and our allies. Third, U.S. assistance has made a difference, but if the United States steps back, then the region's needs will go unmet or others will fill the gap. USAID programs like the Resilient Communities Activity and Employment and Enterprise Development Activity addressed some of the root causes of extremism by supporting rural economic development, youth opportunities, and civil society. These modest investments produced real results. However, as these programs conclude, our ability to bolster Central Asia's resilience is at risk. Some may argue that U.S. resources are better spent elsewhere. However, the cost of inaction could be greater in the long term. The Central Asian states have sought deeper ties with the United States because they value our partnership on security and development issues. A vacuum left by the United States could embolden extremist groups, as local governments may lack the capacity to counter evolving threats without our support. Russia and China are also poised to expand their influence. China's Belt and Road projects have already increased Beijing's economic leverage, and Russia's security agreements could limit our access to intelligence and regional cooperation. Let me close by emphasizing that now is not the time to abandon our Central Asian partners. Sustained, strategic U.S. engagement in Central Asia can advance our national security interests by working with the region toward long-term stability and preventing future terrorist attacks at home and abroad. Thank you for your attention and your continued commitment to our security.
And there you have it, right? So, look, committees like this will come and go every, 2 or 3 months about informing the public the current threat to the United States. And when you only have part of the picture, you're not getting the whole picture. Thus, we're not getting the whole truth about what's, what is the real threat. On top of that, the amount of disinformation coming online from alt media, the lack of information from the legacy media, the disinformation coming from the intelligence services, not all the time, but every once in a while. And of course, the big one, the lack of information. Because if you don't know, you don't know, and you can believe whatever you want. All right, guys, that's the end of this video. Have a good one. I'll see you tomorrow when I share my thoughts about the after effects of what a terrorist attack could look like after, in regards to our civil liberties.